All right, let's start again. And you might not be able to see any slides in blue, which is all of my slides, but that's fine. I'll try and just verbalize everything the best that I can. So, oh, there we go. That's a lot better. Yay. We're excited to be here. Again, my name is Hilary Lewkowitz, Director of Destination Development and Sustainability at the Colorado Tourism Office. I'll let Eliza and Shannon introduce themselves.
I'm Eliza Voss, Vice President of Destination Marketing at the Aspen Chamber Resort Association in Aspen, Colorado.
And I'm Shannon Hessler with the town of Mount Crested Butte in Colorado as well.
Great. And can everybody hear them in the back-ish? Okay, great. Right. All sorts. I love technology. Okay. All right, so in the next hour, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Colorado Tourism Office for those of you that aren't familiar with the CTO. We'll talk about the role of tourism in climate action. Then I'll turn it over to Eliza and Shannon to talk about ideas and projects that they have going on in Aspen and Mount Crested Butte. Then I'll save some time for questions, and then we do have a few discussion questions, so hopefully y'all can stick around. Our goal is to try to find the balance between us talking at you and you being able to talk at us and talk amongst yourselves. Oh yeah, that's bad. Okay. All right, so the Colorado Tourism Office is a division of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. We are the state's tourism marketing and management organization. So we typically work directly with local and regional destination marketing and management organizations, as well as industry associations. And our goal, our vision, is to empower the tourism industry by inspiring the world to explore Colorado responsibly and respectfully. We're going to fight this the whole way through with each slide. All right, in the fall of 2024, so just this past year, we published a statewide destination stewardship strategic plan, which was a year-long effort with a broad range of stakeholders to really foster a tourism industry that supports a balance of quality of life for residents, quality of experiences for visitors, while enhancing our environment and our community. So it's a big shift. One that's been happening for a number of years within the tourism industry, to not just be an industry that's focused on getting people here and the economic impacts of tourism, but really being able to broaden those key performance indicators beyond economic impacts, looking at inclusivity, accessibility, impacts on climate, the environment, and a more holistic view of how tourism both impacts and benefits local communities. Next. Okay. All right, so Q and climate action. We have a whole section in our 140-page statewide destination stewardship plan on climate action. Some of those strategies include those that we can lead on, where we have a sphere of influence and control, and that's where we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And then we also have opportunities to partner and work with those that are already doing incredible work, but know that we can really bring the tourism industry into that, and that includes a partnership with the Colorado Green Business Network. And then there's other areas where we have less of a sphere of influence, but we still want to advocate for, and I think of things like the aviation industry, which is the elephant in the room. We also have a new program that we launched this spring, the Colorado Tourism Climate Champions Program, and the goal of that is to educate our local destination marketing and management organizations on the role that they can play in climate action and support them through education, peer networking, and coaching to develop strategies. We're also working on a white paper around winter tourism resiliency and climate action planning. So we all know that our winters are changing, and what's the role of the tourism industry to really be prepared and adapt to that changing future. All right, So let's dig into the role of tourism in climate action. And many of you are either deeply involved in tourism in your local communities, or you work in partnership with those tourism leaders. So we all know that people are drawn to Colorado for its natural beauty, for outdoor recreation opportunities, for our vibrant communities. And in our mountain communities, the reality is that most of it is being driven by the tourism economy, which is generating taxes, jobs, the development of infrastructure. But that economy doesn't just kind of happen organically, or at least it shouldn't. It really does take leadership and collaboration. And with this shift in how the tourism industry and leaders at a destination level have been involved in tourism and moving just outside of that realm of traditional advertising, more into that marketing and management scope, it really gives us an opportunity to play a role in climate action. All right, one back. Oh, am I playing? Okay, yeah, if you want to advance them, that would be awesome. That would be great. Great, all right. So tourism both contributes to and is impacted by climate change. There was a study that was done that looked at the average breakdown of greenhouse gases for the tourism industry, and this was a poll to destination marketing and management organizations around the world, their average breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions. 72% is transportation to and within the destination. 12% is food, so looking at both the production of food and food waste. 8% is accommodations, both the construction of and the running of accommodations, and then 6% is events and activities. And this really gives us an opportunity to not only organize how we want to move forward with climate action, but also to prioritize. So I'm going to talk about things in the realm of supply versus demand. Demand being that consumer, how we interact with visitors and curating their experience both when they come and when they arrive at the destination. And the supply side, Eliza and Shannon will cover that a little bit more of how we work directly with businesses. Next slide. And of course, we all know that we're being impacted by climate change. And I don't think this is anything that is new to you all, but I think the big takeaway really is that we have this opportunity that when we are doing strategic planning within the tourism industry, that we're not approaching that from a business as usual mindset, but instead looking at a future that is not what we're necessarily currently in right now. Next slide. All right, so why collaborate with the tourism industry? So typically and historically, the tourism industry has not been a part of local or regional climate action planning. However, we are both contributing to and impacted by climate change. We do have a place, and we do have some puzzles that are some pieces that fit into the broader puzzle, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It looks different based on where you're at and how your government's structured, how tourism sits within locally or regionally. But in general, naturally, we're organizers, collaborators, marketers, and creators, and we are typically that megaphone and voice to visitors, being able to really influence how they are traveling to and experiencing the destination. So I want to give a couple examples of what this looks like for the Colorado Tourism Office at the statewide level, and you can go to the next slide. And we're going to approach it from kind of this climate lens mindset in this first mile, where when we think about the tourism industry as a whole and globally, it's really overwhelming and complex, and really we're trying to focus it more at the local level, looking at how we can have an influence from the areas of work that we're already doing, and then build partnerships in those areas where we're not familiar with. So applying that climate lens, really shifting how you're marketing to visitors, how you're developing these experiences in a way that's just naturally kind of pushing people into a more low impact, low carbon experience. So there's been some fantastic work done in Europe, and a lot of times we're looking over either in the West Coast or Northern Europe at all of the amazing work that they're doing. There are several country and regional destination marketing and management organizations that are not only looking at targeting visitors based on the benefits that they bring, whether that's economic impact or say like length of stay, but we're also looking at their carbon footprint and their impact. So looking at the pluses and minuses and making those targeted marketing decisions based not only on how long they're staying, which is a fantastic benchmark for the longer people stay, the less folks you have to travel to make the same amount of money, but how could you potentially look at markets that aren't as far away and targeting those markets that you are seeing in the data that don't have to travel halfway around the world to get to your destination. You can also look at off-peak season. A lot of times we just naturally like to cram as many people as we can into a place for a 3-month period of time. But if we can really extend those seasons and not have to build up infrastructure very, very short period of time and expand those shoulder seasons, that's an opportunity as well. And Eliza will talk a little bit about kind of making sure you have community input on pieces like that. Us in the room, we might make travel decisions based on the emotional appeal, us wanting to do better for the planet, but that is not typically how travelers go about making travel plans. Really, it's about making their decisions for travel easy as well as the default decisions. So I'll show you a video in a second of what that can look like, but we're not positioning it as you're using the bus because you're saving X number of tons of carbon. Instead, it's the bus is more fun. You don't have to think about driving. It really is a better opportunity. And we can go ahead and show that video. If it's light enough.
I'm Claudia Garofalo. Do Colorado right this winter. Travel car-free to the mountains. From shuttles to trains, bypass the winter driving. So you can have an epic ride down the mountain and an easy ride up.
Great. All right. And then product development. So not only providing those one-off experiences that maybe use public transportation, local food systems, but really curating multi-day itineraries for visitors because we want to expand those lengths of stay so we can have less people stay for longer. And so there's a lot of ways to incentivize local businesses. We're partnering with the Colorado Green Business Network where businesses can become certified. We're now adding those certifications to our website. We're also making sure that we prioritize those businesses when it comes to any type of PR or media opportunities. So making sure you can make that business case for folks to make the right decision. And then you can also curate the experience by providing opportunities for visitors to give back and be a part of the community, whether that's with time or money. So I'll show a couple examples and then I'll wrap it up. The first one is with our EV byways, and that's a partnership, you can go to the next slide, with the Colorado Department of Transportation and Colorado Energy Office. And we've been working since 2017 to electrify all of Colorado's scenic and historic byways, meaning that there's charging infrastructure every 100 miles. Right now we have 19 out of the 26 byways that are designated electrified. We've built a bunch of itineraries for visitors to experience the byways with an electric vehicle and connecting that to local businesses, to businesses that uplift local food systems, to accommodations that are sustainably certified, to a number of low-impact travel opportunities. So bringing that all together into something that looks fun and enticing to visitors. Next slide. And then we also have a partnership with Dark Sky Colorado. They're a chapter of the International Dark Sky Certification. And we've been partnered with them since 2022. We provide technical assistance to destinations and parks to achieve International Dark Sky Place certification, reducing emissions and light pollution. So ultimately, it's a value add for the environment and for our local communities, but it also adds a new experience and a new way to travel across Colorado. So we're looking at how can you attach these experiences to accommodations, to guided trips, to educational opportunities, and bringing those all again into a multi-day visitor experience. Next slide. And finally, I'll just quickly touch on resiliency planning. It's mostly focused on that mitigation piece and now looking at adaptation. And Eliza and Shannon will talk more about this. But in all of our strategic planning work that we do at the Colorado Tourism Office is trying to shift that 10-year plan, not as business as usual, but knowing that we're going to have those shorter winters, we're going to have wildfires and all the other challenges that we're having in the environment due to climate change. And with that, I will turn it over to Shannon.
Great, you can go to the next slide. Hopefully these ones work, but we'll see. Okay, great. So my name is Shannon, and I am with the town of Mount Crested Butte, which you can go on to the next slide. If you're not familiar with Mount Crested Butte, it is a separate community. I'll give you a thumbs up. How about that? It's a separate community from the town of Crested Butte. So this is the community where the ski area is based. What's interesting about Mount Crested Butte is this is my street. This is what it looked like pretty much when I left yesterday. In that photo, I've lived on that street for 5 years, and I think in that photo there's maybe 2 full-time residences. The rest is all short-term rentals and second homeowners, and it makes sense, right? It's the bedroom community for the ski resort. It's where the density is for our guests, and so that's where this community is. It's a super resort community. There are about 900 full-time residents, but there's over 700 short-term rental units. And so during our peak season, which is Christmas and summer, spring break, we take the population of that little town from 900 to over 5,000. And so because it's a really unique little town, very connected to the ski area, the base of the ski area is essentially our downtown. The municipality also operates as the main tourism office for Mount Crested Butte. So I just want to talk a little bit about, paint a little picture for you guys about Mount Crested Butte and what tourism and climate change looks like. As you can imagine, the majority of our emissions, scope 1 and 2, which is transportation and buildings, are the majority of our emissions, and a little bit from waste. But the majority of the building emissions are coming from those 5,000 visitors, not the 900 full-time residents. And so because it's such a small community, our visitors have an outsized impact on our emissions. And so we're talking about climate action. Mount Crested Butte is a very new community. It's only 50 years old as of last year. And so we're really new to climate action planning as well. And so when we're talking about climate action planning, we're really trying to start with the tourism as the first lens. So looking at how we begin a climate action planning process with tourism in mind. And so a big part of that is marketing and storytelling and talking to our guests who may not be from Colorado, who may not be from a place that regularly talks about climate change or recycles. And we want to be able to tell this story of climate change to those guests. So I'm going to tell you a quick story that relates to climate change and me personally. One of our signature events in Mount Crested Butte is called the Grand Traverse. Eliza's probably heard of it. It's the big ski race that goes from Mount Crested Butte to Aspen, and in the summer there's a running race that goes from Mount Crested Butte to Aspen, and then a bike race that goes from Aspen back to Mount Crested Butte. It's about 40 miles. The ski race starts at midnight, and that's because the snowpack is much safer while it's still frozen, while the sun's still down. So this event, the ski race has been going on for over 30 years. 2023, we had to run what's called a reverse traverse. So instead of being able to go to Aspen, all of the ski racers could only go halfway, and then they had to turn around and come back to Mount Crested Butte. And that's because the snowpack didn't freeze overnight. It was the end of March, early April, and so it wasn't safe for those racers to continue over the mountain pass because of the danger of avalanche, wet slab avalanches. And then the following year, about 9 p.m. on race day, they called it and they had to cancel the Grand Traverse altogether. And that's because of the danger of wet slabs, but also because there was a snow bridge on the traditional course that went over a river. And when the safety team went out that day, the snow bridge was completely collapsed into the river. So it was not safe at all to send any racers, so that event was canceled. I wasn't a participant in either of those races, but I did train for the bike race this summer. And so I spent all summer biking, getting ready to go, and about 2 weeks before the bike race, the AQI, the air quality index in Crested Butte, was over 150, which means it's not safe to recreate outside, and that was due to wildfires in Colorado, California, the entire West, everywhere. The smoke was really, really bad. And so we were all looking at each other like, whoa, is climate change going to impact all 3 of the Grand Traverses this year? Are we going to have to outright cancel this whole race series, and what's the future of this race series? And so, luckily or unluckily for me, they didn't have to cancel the bike race, so I did have to bike the 40 miles. But it was a really, really close call. And so I think that these types of storytelling and also impact of events, there's over 1,000 participants in these events. And so as we are talking about including climate action in tourism, I think that stories like this that can resonate with a wider audience are really important for us to talk about. And then the other bullet point on this side is that, and it probably won't surprise anyone in this room, but it's a ski resort community. Summer tourism far exceeds the winter tourism at this moment. So our ski town is more of a summer town, even now, than it is a ski town. So, what are we going to do about the Grand Traverse? Sadly, I don't have an answer for you on that. But I do want to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that our community of Mount Crested Butte is facing in trying to adapt and mitigate to climate change, so maybe this type of event can continue into the future. And that's the next slide. Thanks. So, as I said before, we're just starting our climate action planning journey, and so we're trying to include everything that is guest-facing, tourist-facing. We're trying to look at it through a climate lens and make sure that, as Hilary was talking about earlier, the first choice, the easiest choice, is the low-carbon choice. And not only that, but how do we market it so that it's also the most fun choice? It's the part that people talk about when they go home. And 2 things that I really wanted to highlight that happen in Mount Crested Butte and Crested Butte is that we have this really great recreation path, paved bike path between Crested Butte and Mount Crested Butte. And the path continues all the way up to that trailhead that's covered in snow right there. It's plowed in the winter. And the town of Mount Crested Butte has given away over 500 e-bike rebates in the last 2 years. And that's to full-time residents that are commuters, but it's also to short-term rentals. It's also to second homeowners. And so it's really quite common to see visitors getting to and from the different towns, commuting down from their place that they're staying down to the base area to go to the bike park or to go to the restaurants or whatever, to go to the bus stop via e-bikes. And that's part of the experience of being in Mount Crested Butte, is that you get to brop around on your e-bike. And then another signature thing that people talk about a lot when visiting Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte, is our buses. We have a really robust transit system that operates between the 2 communities, and then we have microtransit, we have condo buses that go. You can get anywhere within the town on a bus, and they're really beautiful, fun buses. And so it's a big part of your experience to ride the buses. They all have different themes. This one's the elf bus that runs at Christmas. The driver dresses up. There's presents inside. There's candy inside. It's a big part of your experience visiting Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte during Christmas. And so as we're planning ahead with our climate action, but also just the development of the town, we're really thinking about how we can include that climate lens into our marketing, our placemaking, and how we can continue to have really consistent messaging for those climate friendly, but also the easiest options. So here, you don't need to have a car, and that's the easiest option. I also just wanted to highlight some regional collaboration because I think that's really important between the two towns. Here is Crested Butte, up here, Mount Crested Butte. That's the way to Aspen. But we completed an electric vehicle readiness plan last year with the town of Crested Butte and a lot of input from the county. And this is a plan that establishes, we don't want you to drive, but we understand the realities of living in a mountain community is that you may have to drive. And so we want to make it accessible for residents and visitors to be able to drive an EV. And so that's a snow-capable EV, that's an EV. We want to really dispel the myth that cold weather charging impacts your EV so much you can't drive it. It's not true. And so that was a big project. And part of that was also creating a map of EV chargers from DIA, from Montrose Regional Airport, Grand Junction Regional Airport, all of the places that people come for our drive market to showcase that you can drive here in an electric vehicle. And then once you get here, you can ride the ELF bus. We have really good bike and bus connectivity, and so pushing that onto our visitors as part of the experience. And then we also collaborate with Vail Resorts as much as we can. They have we're very aligned on our climate action goals, and so we work together whenever possible. And we just started, as part of working with Hilary, work with the Colorado Green Business Network to help elevate our businesses. So I want to end on a specific initiative that we're working on. As I said, we're pretty new to climate action planning, so zero waste has been around in other communities and other events for a long time. And so we're hoping that by starting this process now, we can kind of leverage all the other communities and what they've been doing so that we can leapfrog and get right into zero waste. And so the biggest challenge with that is that the majority of our market in Mount Crested Butte is from states that aren't used to recycling, composting, anything like that. And so bringing your own bags, reusable cups at events. And so we want to make that part of the culture, not only at events, but also inside our short-term rentals, inside our hotels. And so there's very consistent messaging around, you have to bring your own water bottle, you have to bring your own coffee cup, your own grocery bag. Recycling, composting, all of that is part of your whole experience, and then it's really elevated at an event. And so it's a big focus as part of zero waste events is focusing on that storytelling, placemaking, like this is when you're in Crested Butte, this is what you do. And kind of the process that we're working through right now is implementing zero waste at all town events so that we can show everybody what's possible and how to do it, how to get it done. And then the next step is incentivizing, providing instruction and the resources for all of our outside vendors, and focusing wherever we can on digital options. Something that's come up recently is that we have a event in Mount Crested Butte called the Chili Beer Festival. You have to be 21 to enter that festival and drink, but you can be a child and go in and eat chili, and so we have wristbands. So we're trying to figure out how to get away from things like wristbands that are reusable, lanyards, like how do we skip all of that for our zero waste? So that's the stuff that we're trying to brainstorm right now. And then our goal is to have in 2028 an ordinance requiring all of our events within Mount Crested Butte to be zero waste. And so we'll be partnering a lot with Vail Resorts, which owns CBMR, Crested Butte Mountain Resort, and then the Crested Butte Mount Crested Butte Chamber of Commerce. So all of this is kind of an opportunity and challenge for our municipality. And the great thing about beginning this process now is that we've gotten to leverage and learn a lot from other partners within our region, including Aspen, which is very close nearby, biking distance, some may say. And so I'll let Eliza kind of talk about how they've been doing this for so long.
Thanks. It looks like maybe we've solved the color issue. I'm Eliza Voss. I'm the Vice President of Destination Marketing with the Aspen Chamber Resort Association. So we are set up a little bit differently in that we sit outside of city government, and hopefully just me being here is a good way if you are a municipality and have not yet reached out to your local DMO, which is a destination marketing organization or chamber. This can kind of illustrate how collaborations between public-private partnerships are a key to success. Next slide, please. So sort of sustainability and climate action are part of the DNA of Aspen as a municipality. In 1885, Aspen was the first municipality west of the Mississippi to use hydroelectric power. So that's just sort of setting the stage for you of where we are as a town. By 2020, 100% of city-owned facilities were powered by renewable energy. The Aspen Skiing Company, which is a privately held skiing company, began sustainability work in the late 1990s. And then the Aspen Chamber, the organization that I work for, launched the Aspen Destination Management Plan in 2022. And similar to Hilary's, the state's plan, it's the state, and in our case, ACRA, that led the work, but it's for the entire destination. So we just happen to be the organization that led on that. Next slide. So let's just set the stage. The reality is I am not a climate action subject matter expert. I am working for a DMO, and just shout out to DMOs, they tend to be people that get shit done. So lean on them and ask for some help. And our role really has been working with the city of Aspen as a facilitator and information distributor. So they have the ability to influence and implement policy, and then we can work together with them. Because we're a chamber of commerce, we have access to the business community, so we can disseminate information. We can provide educational membership events, and then also as the DMO, the marketing organization, we can make our marketing message really show the values base versus kind of going, you know, there is a reality of the household income you need to have to be able to get a hotel room in Aspen. But our marketing really centralizes on values based so that we're conveying the type of visitation and who we are as a community to those visitors that we want to have come see us. So next slide, please. As part of the Destination Management Plan, which I mentioned was launched in 2022, there were quite a few action items. We hired Destination Think, which you may or may not know, but they are a global team of consultants who helped us form this plan, and that global piece will be important in a little while when I explain some of the kind of key takeaways we had from that. But 3 of the things that fit into the plan were accelerate the reduction of carbon footprint of tourism, preserve and regenerate the natural environment, and catalyze sustainable choices. So under accelerate the reduction of the carbon footprint of tourism, one of the recommendations was to get GSTC certified, which is the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, Mountain Ideal certified. And we did work through that. We have that certification. As part of that certification, we also needed to launch the Green Business Network of Aspen. That is something we did in collaboration with the city off of a state plan. So there's quite a lot of collaboration happening. The state launched that. The city had the technical assistance in which they could provide to the businesses, and we could connect them with the businesses and then also provide marketing to celebrate those businesses that have achieved that recognition. So really multi-pronged approach there. With preserve and regenerate the natural environment, one example of that is that we have an Aspen Pledge, and anybody, resident or visitor that signs that, the Aspen Chamber will donate $18.80 to 2 of our nonprofit agencies that work with our public lands to regenerate those trails that are enjoyed by both residents and visitors. So that's really important because those are dollars, right? My budget is funded by a lodging tax. So visitors coming to stay in the destination are generating that tax that I can then put back into our local assets. We are also part of a group with the Maroon Bells, which is one of our most visited natural, it's a Forest Service property, but most visited sites within Aspen. We've worked with the city, the county, RAFTA, which is our local transportation company, the Aspen Skiing Company, and we have a transportation reservation system, and the Aspen Chamber held that reservation system for some time. And that was a management technique to not only preserve the asset, but also the experience on that asset. And then catalyzing sustainable choices. We've talked a little bit about that through marketing techniques, so really highlighting those businesses that have made an effort in sustainability, but also highlighting experiences where you don't need to have a car to come to Aspen, alternate modes of transportation, and really elevating and trying to, a lot of that is done through meta advertising because there's so much content out in the world, you just have to get it out there to people sometimes, but really trying to highlight those sustainable choices once guests are within the destination. And then I just want to highlight some of the large, meaningful programs the city of Aspen has been leading on. One is the Building IQ program, and that has a goal, I believe, of 70%. Jimena's in the room. But getting the commercial buildings within the commercial core of Aspen to reduce their carbon footprint, carbon emissions. Organics diversion, that was launched 2 years ago, and that was 2 commercial properties as well. So all businesses are now required to compost. We have a landfill situation in Pitkin County, so doing everything we can to reduce or extend the life of that landfill. And then they have an EV charging strategy, and there was also just a session about how they have electrified their own fleet as well. So they led on those programs because they have the ability and knowledge to do so, and then we have the ability to connect with the business community and get that information out there. And then just really in collaboration, the Colorado Green Business Network of Aspen. And like I mentioned, they provide the technical assistance, and then we celebrate and provide marketing across social website channels to highlight those. Next slide. So for my lessons learned, this is fairly slow work, but it's very meaningful. And I do want to hit on something Hilary mentioned, is how shoulder season can be an opportunity in a climate changing world. And this is just something we as Aspen as a community need to think about, because our residents, we do resident sentiment surveys, and our residents have been pretty clear that they do not want to extend the tourism season into shoulder seasons. And so we took that when we launched the Aspen Destination Management Plan. We really took that feedback to heart. And we have, we used to run a marketing program called Secret Season, which was to promote spring season, and we shut that down to respond to our residents' needs. But there is the reality that the ski season is shrinking. So these are questions as a community we need to think about. You know, are we protecting the shoulder season, or what do we need to do to protect our economy? You know, there are sunk costs in all of our communities, in hotel rooms and restaurants, and so, you know, there are events that will need to kind of, you know, fill those assets that we have already in existence. And that relates to climate resilience. So I just throw that out there for you all to see what we're kind of reckoning with in our community. And then our Aspen Destination Management Plan, which I mentioned was put together by global consultants. One of their recommendations, because we do have a FBO at our airport, was to implement a tax on private jets coming into the community. And so when they gave us the plan, we were like, great, let's see what we can do. And we went to the airport, and they're like, yeah, nope, the FAA will not allow you to treat different operations differently. So that was a huge learning experience for us. And they, being a global firm, have the ability to do things like that in Europe. So it was a good learning experience across the board. And, you know, it was a recommendation that had good roots, but there's just not certain things that we couldn't do. I do believe that the Aspen Skiing Company, who has more of an advocacy arm, is working directly with the FAA to try and implement changes, but there are realities in place. And then we do have a sister city, and I just mentioned this because I think sometimes, we went to our sister city, Queenstown, and their just baseline of sustainability is so much higher than the US in general. So I think that it can be sort of disheartening to try and do this work and make impacts in a meaningful way when you're like, oh, we really have to just sort of like reset our baseline to then go up from there. So that's all from me, I think.
Thanks, Eliza. All right. So we ended up talking at you for longer than we had hoped for. But I wanted to open it up for any questions that you might have, and then if we have time, we'll save a little bit of time for some discussion. Yeah, and project loudly if you can.
Oh, I had a question about one of your last comments about the shoulder season, and I was curious, is there a difference in what small business owners and people who need jobs want versus people who don't need to work? I mean, I'm a little surprised by that result.
Yes, there's some just job security in there for me because I will never make everybody happy. But yes, that was the biggest kind of pushback we got when we launched the plan, was from business owners that were like, but we operate a business 12 months a year. And they still do operate a business, and there's a couple things that, so essentially we ran a pretty underfunded marketing campaign when we were trying to promote shoulder season, when the community had kind of given us grace to do that. When we stopped doing that, we determined that people weren't just going to stop coming, and so the role we could play was to provide information on responsible and respectful visitation to those people who did come and were in market during, end of April into May. We also happen to have a failing runway. So every spring, our airport is shut down for about 4 weeks. So there is a natural sort of decline in visitation just as a result of that sort of infrastructure issue, which will eventually be addressed. But the other way we can sort of assist businesses who are, operating full-time is we run cooperative marketing campaigns with some of our member businesses. So if they have like a concert that they really want to promote in May, they can take advantage of the cooperative so like they feel supported by us. And then just in the seasonal nature, this has always been an issue in our resort town, is like a lot of the frontline workers are working 2 or 3 jobs. So there is also a natural sort of need for respite during the shoulder season, and hotels often take advantage of that by closing, restaurants close, so there is a compression that happens as well. So it's definitely, an ebb and a flow. You're not making everybody happy all the time, but the closures that happen for either upkeep or by choice happen to allow some compression for those businesses that are open to be successful.
Yeah, up front.
So kind of a question for you guys. For the Green Business Program, can you speak, so is I guess I'm curious if the foundation is through the Colorado Green Business Network? And then I had a follow-up question for you on just your role as the city has moved on some of those policies, like building IQ, which some of those are not very, I guess, invasive, but they have a chance to become more impactful to businesses. And if you're seeing, so I guess a 2-part question: how did the structure of the Green Business Program come about, and how's the Colorado Tourism Office supporting it? And then, are you guys finding that you're kind of your listening piece to business complaints about sustainability policy coming from the city, and how you manage that?
Yeah, I can start, and then I'll turn it over to Eliza. The Colorado Green Business Network is a division of the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and they provide the technical assistance, they provide the certification. When we were developing the Destination Stewardship Strategic Plan, the consulting firm that we were working with is also global. They're like, you need to have tourism certification. We're like, that's not our lane, right? And so we found the Colorado Green Business Network as somebody we can partner with, where we're running this program, the Colorado Tourism Climate Champions program, and we're working with those destinations and asking them to at least consider partnering with the Green Business Network. You can either like work directly with the Colorado Green Business Network as a business, or you can create this unique partnership where the city of Aspen is leading the charge, but with the framework from the state.
And I'll speak a little bit to building IQ, but I'm not a city employee, so I don't have all of the answers. But I do know that when they first were launching the program, it sounded like a lot of the costs were being passed through from the building owner to the business operator, which is unfortunate in so many ways. But that was a big, I think, hurdle that they were trying to figure out how to launch the program without impacting the business, but get people to do the right thing. But I can connect you with the people that are at the city level, yeah.
Question in the back?
Yeah, hey, I was just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about how you're measuring the tourism industry's impact on carbon emissions and what that change looks like over time, hopefully improve.
Yeah, gosh, wow. And that's a hard one. So at the state level, I think it's a little bit more complex. There's a lot of things being measured. And so we're, from the state level and looking within the tourism lane, we're specifically focused on the impacts that we can have through the Colorado Green Business Network because they are tracking emissions. And so our goal is to really boost the number of tourism businesses across the state participating in that program. So that's specifically how we're looking at it because there's so many other agencies and divisions within the state that are doing that work. So we're trying to stay within our lane. But at the like a more local level, I think you're able to do a lot more. And Shannon, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I can speak to how we track them at least. So Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte, Gunnison are all within Gunnison County, and so each of those municipalities does their individual greenhouse gas emissions inventories, and then Gunnison County does an inventory and our airport is within. So we can kind of track scope 1 and 2 emissions in that way. So we are tracking the impacts from the airport and the travel of commuting from the airport up to the ski area. So we can track that, and we've watched it kind of fluctuate with, COVID as a low, and then the few years post-COVID as much higher, and now it's kind of evening back to pre-COVID levels. I will say that a trend that we've noticed, or maybe not noticed a trend, is that as summer tourism increases and winter tourism kind of stays stagnant, we're not seeing, we're kind of seeing a reduction in some winters of emissions because we have so much, especially in Mount Crested Butte. Crested Butte has an electrification mandate for new buildings, but there's a lot of old buildings in both towns, a lot of natural gas in buildings that were built in the 70s. So winter tourism has a really big impact. And so even with like a reduction in winter tourism, the impact of winter tourism, it far exceeds the impacts of the summer tourism as far as buildings. We're in a drive market, obviously, from the Front Range, and so those emissions fluctuations are harder to measure. But like the scope 3 actual impacts from tourists, like we can measure the waste, we can measure the energy, but we're not tracking the emissions as someone drives from their house in Littleton to Crested Butte, for example. And that's a lot harder to quantify. So if anybody starts to figure that out. But it's interesting that the trends are changing, but the overall emissions aren't decreasing as significantly as we'd like to see.
Yeah, in the back.
Do you see dependency on tourism as such a big chunk of our economy as a challenge or an issue? And like, how do you think about diversifying the economy to just support people throughout the year?
Yeah, as a person representing tourism for the state of Colorado, absolutely diversifying economies is a great idea. Anytime you put all your eggs in one basket, it's challenging. But in a lot of our communities, that's what we've transformed to become. And so we're trying to work with what we got. I think of Ouray, for example, where, and a lot of other communities on the Western Slope that transition from a resource extraction economy to one that's more outdoor recreation based. And in order to have an economy on that, you have to have visitors. And so in a lot of cases, like, yes, for diversification, but sometimes it's hard and it's slow going. I don't know if you two have anything to add to that.
I would say, in addition to outdoor rec, one of Aspen's diversifiers is the arts and culture scene there, but that too is tourism dependent. It just is a little bit less. I mean, everything will be impacted by climate, right? But you could still have the literary festival, even if the snow season's shorter. So looking at how to, ensure that some of the diverse offerings that we have can continue to be financially sustainable, so that you still have something to offer.
Yeah.
I'm from Forks, Washington, which has a population of just about 3,000. And so every time we have a tourist event, it doubles, maybe triples the size of our town. And the strain on our infrastructure, the police, the hospitals, the roads, is really the thing that the city is struggling with the most. So I was wondering if any of you could talk about both like funding and organizing around building the resources that are needed for the tourists.
Shannon?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the thing that comes up for us the most, and I think probably for a lot of communities like this, is the pinch point is housing. So continuously working on affordable housing as a climate strategy, also for reducing emissions. People work where they live, but yeah, we're at capacity kind of in Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte. Like, we can't physically fit more people on the roads. We don't have any kind of infrastructure for it. And so I do know that our regional destination management sustainable tourism office has kind of pulled the plug on some of their advertising, like in the Front Range, during years that the tourism is really spiking, because we have a physical capacity.
Yeah. You mentioned tourism grant money. I was wondering,
Yeah.
does Colorado allow you to spend any of your tourism grant money on infrastructure? In Washington, that's not allowed.
There are Colorado Tourism Office grants available for management, but typically they are actually like technical assistance versus dollars. And I would just say, like, both Leadville and Snowmass, which are close to us, have heavy event-driven tourism, and sometimes that's the model that is breaking the infrastructure, whereas a steadier, I guess, brand level, for a marketing term, but like a brand level driven tourism versus like peaking out can be more sustainable for your community, and then the growth is a little bit more managed.
Yeah, and I know from a grants perspective, we provide funding on signage and education, wayfinding and educational signage, and typically that's how we've shifted when there's events or times of the year that have these bigger spikes, is that we're not advertising, instead we're educating. And so we still have the megaphone out, but we know people are coming, so how can we get them to try and do the right thing? So, yeah, Natalie in the back.
Yeah, just on that visitor education piece, is there a way of, how are you measuring the success of those efforts? Is it just, folks who are signing up for pledges? Is it awareness, or is there another way to see
Yeah, we have, we're working on publicly launching our Destination Stewardship Index, which is the tourism indicators looking beyond just economic impact. And some of those indicators off the top of my head include like number of search and rescue calls, for example. So we're looking at decreasing that, and that's based on education. I know with URA, with their ambassador program, they are tracking trash collected at tabling events. And so, and I know other communities, Chaffey County is looking at human waste. And so, yeah, certainly are ways to track it, and I think it just makes sense for what you have based in your community. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
You mentioned something about contributions being made and like being matched. Could you talk a little bit more about that and like who's making that? Are you focusing on groups or conferences or guests or like, yeah, how is that all coming about?
Yeah, so the budget comes totally from the lodging tax, so which is paid by someone staying in an overnight accommodation. So there's a 2% lodging tax. My organization gets 75% of that. 25% of that goes to the in-town transportation. So that's where the funding comes from. The only thing someone has to do is sign their name to the pledge, the Aspen Pledge, and then we will donate to either the Independence Pass Foundation or Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers. We picked $18.80 because that was the year Aspen was founded. But I will say that for literally no money coming out of their pocket, they just sign their name. It has gone so much slower than I thought it would. We committed $50,000 and we've probably exhausted half of it. And that sort of speaks to your point about sort of signage and messaging. And I would say there is so much fatigue, particularly post-COVID, that it's a real challenge, right? And it does have to just become the easiest, only choice you can make, right? But we are asking somebody to read, 10 lines and write their name.
Great. Well, I think we're about out of time. Thank you all for coming, and we'll stick around if anybody else has questions.